There's a book put out a few years ago called Not a Fan. And it's based on the premise that a lot of people are fans of Jesus. We like his music. It really moves us. We love to listen to it, raise our hands, whatever. We like Jesus' music. And we like some of the verses in his book. The Bible. Some of those verses just really speak to us and touch us, and they move us. And we put them up places. We look at them today, and so we're a fan of Jesus' music and a fan of some of his verses. And this book is saying Jesus doesn't want us to be a fan. Jesus wants us to be a follower. And even then, the subtitle spells it out what that means. The subtitle is Becoming a Completely Committed Follower of Jesus. And I'm glad that it added that, because we're going to be in Matthew chapter 8 today, and we're going to see a lot of people following, and they've got some issues. The word follow, some form of it, appears 5 times in this chapter, and every time the person or the group of people it's associated with, they're lacking something. They're really not much more than fans. And then what's really interesting is there's a couple people who aren't followers. And they're the ones without any issues. They're the ones that Jesus commends more than others. And so it's interesting. It raises this question: what is God looking for in a follower? What is God looking for in a follower? Because it's making the point. Here's 2 people that we're going to see. They aren't followers, but yet they've got something that God wants. And some people who are followers are missing it. Now, if you look at the title of the sermon, you might get some clue into what God's looking for. Following is spelled F-A-I-T-H. That should be a hint. But it raises the question, what's faith? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. It's just like that, do this in remembrance of me. Oh, that's Jesus. He's God. Okay, check it off, move on. Let's see what God is looking for in a follower. Start at verse 1 in chapter 8 there. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside. Now, what had he been doing up on the mountainside? Sermon on the Mount. So this is immediately following that. And it says, large crowds followed him. So here's the first use of this word followed, and it says large crowds. And there's certainly something good about this, because sometimes, and even later in this chapter, there's large crowds around Jesus because of his miracles. Here they're following him because of his teaching. And so that's a good thing. And Jesus lets that go on. He stays in the midst of them. And then in verse 2 it says, a man with leprosy came and knelt down before him. Now, leprosy is a skin disease, and I don't know about you, I used to think leprosy meant that, like, parts of your body fell off, like, a finger or this or that, because lepers would often be missing those. It doesn't directly do that. Leprosy, what it does is it causes you to lose feelings in your extremities. And so you do things and don't realize, we're cutting away and we hit our finger, we stop. Well, imagine if you didn't feel that. You'd just keep doing whatever you were doing. And that's how some of that happens. So that's what it really is. It's a skin disease, and it was contagious. And so this person, you talk about being a leper as an expression, someone who's a total outcast, because no one wanted to be around them. And for the Jews, they couldn't be around them. They were ceremonially unclean, and they were, again, just from a perspective of physical health, it was dangerous to be around them. You could catch that. So this man with leprosy came and knelt before Jesus and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, he has total faith. He says, you can. I know you can. I have total, faith in your ability to heal me. But look what he says. He says, if you are willing. And the reason for that is, again, most Jews wouldn't get anywhere near a leper. Lepers would have to shout out, unclean, unclean. They'd cover their mouth there like that and shout it out. And so he's like, if you're willing to get close enough, because just about all healings take place when someone puts their hand on someone. He says, Lord, if you are willing, I know you can. But in his mind, there's that question. Well, there's no question with Jesus. Verse 3, Jesus reaches out his hand and he touched the man. For the first time he'd been touched in years. People didn't touch a leper. I'm willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Now, this idea of not telling anyone, apparently Jesus focuses, I don't need more people just to believe in my power that I can heal. That happens easy enough. I don't want that to be the focus. But he says there was in the Old Testament prescribed a sacrifice. If you're healed of leprosy, go do this. And Jesus says as a testimony to them, and we're not totally sure. It seems like maybe to the priests. Jesus is starting to establish his identity. He knows there's going to be a lot of trouble. Let them know that this happened as a result. And that will start to build some credibility there. Again, we're going to see they're going to choose their own way, but among some of them, maybe. And so here's the first person Jesus comes into contact with, this leper, and he heals him. Well, then, as Jesus goes on, it says in verse 5, when he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Now, centurion was an officer in the Roman army, over 100 men. That's the centurion, C-E-N-T, part of it. And so, think about it. This man, he's just a different, in the army. He's in the occupying army. He's a Gentile. He's not a Jew. He's not very well liked among the Jews. It's certainly that position in general. Now, it certainly seems like he had some affinity with the Jews, maybe a good relationship with them. He'd heard about Jesus. But he says he came to Jesus and says, Lord, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. And Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? Now, a lot of translations have it as an expression, I will come and heal him. I think it's better when you look at it, shall I come and heal him? Jesus puts the question out, and look how he answers. Verse 8, the centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Now, just think about that humility right there. Here he is. He's an occupying officer. He could force Jesus or any other Jew to do whatever he wants. But he knows in their culture, if a Jew went into the house of a Gentile, it would make that Jew unclean. Like, I don't deserve to have you do that. I don't deserve you to even come this way. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Just say the word. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Well, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Stop and think about that for a minute. This is really the wait a minute moment of this passage. Realize what's happening here. Jesus, and here's that second time the word following, and who's following him? Those same people who came down off the mountainside. But what's he say about them? He says to these Jews who are following him, I've not found such great faith like this in all of Israel. That'd be like a person standing in the middle of the Cardinals' locker room and talking about some player on another team and saying, I've not found such great football skills in all the Cardinals organization. They're not going to be too happy, are they, to hear that? And this is even worse because even the Cardinals would have to admit there's some quality players on other teams, maybe begrudgingly, but they know these are Jews and this is a Gentile. This person is so far away from God, and Jesus says, I haven't found such great faith among all you people, all you Jews. In fact, it says Jesus was amazed by him. Can you imagine doing something that makes Jesus amazed? I read that, I thought, wow. Doing something, and Jesus like, wow, that's amazing. Okay. That's all you need to hear, wouldn't it? That'd be the gold star for life. You'd be set. And Jesus says that to him. Such great faith. Now, as we see this, and we're going to see such great faith and later on little faith, it's not the size of the faith. It's not like how much they have. It's the content. It's not just that this man had a belief in Jesus' ability. All kinds of people had a belief in Jesus' ability to do miracles. We're going to see that. We have seen that already. But you see that word he uses, authority. He had faith in Jesus' authority, that he put it together, that Jesus, if you have this power, you don't even have to come to my house. You just say the word, and my servant will be healed. And again, you contrast that with the first person we saw, and he had great faith. Lord, if you're willing, I know you can. I don't have a doubt that you can heal me. But if you're willing, I think you got to touch me. I think you got to be close. I think you got to touch me. That's how it works. And the centurion, though, like, no, you don't even have to come to my house. You have such authority, such power, such control. You don't even have to come here. Just say it. And in the Bible, we've never seen anything prior to this where Jesus healed at a distance. So he didn't have a basis for that. The other man had a basis for his. So Jesus says, such great faith in you. Not just the size, but just it's different than other people's faith. Well, then in verse 11, Jesus goes off and on a little tangent. He makes a general statement based on this. He says, I say to you that many will come from the east and the west. So he's talking about Gentiles, people who aren't in the land of Israel, and take their place at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. So this very event that the Jews have been waiting for their whole history And he mentions the biggest Jews, the heroes of the Jewish nation, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He says, you know who's going to be sitting with them at this feast that you've been waiting for hundreds and thousands of years? Gentiles. These people that you look down on so much. And then he says, but the subjects of the kingdom, and literally it's the sons of the kingdom, the people of Israel, who in that sense have been part of God's kingdom in general for such a long time, will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's talking about eternity there when it uses that phrase. You'll be eternally separated from God. And the context tells us what's the reason that the Gentiles are in and some Jews are out? It's this faith that I just saw. This faith that this Gentile had. If someone has that faith, they're in. And there will be Gentiles with that faith that will be in the kingdom, and there will be Jews without it who are outside the kingdom, who think I should be in just because I'm a Jew, just because I'm a follower. I'm a subject of the kingdom. I've been following God a long time. Jesus says, no, that's not what does it. And then verse 13, Jesus said to the centurion, go, let it be done, just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. So here we have this idea of faith. And look what Jesus says, let it be done just as you believed it would. Faith starts with belief. It's something in our mind. In my mind, I agree that this is true. I agree that this is a fact. I think that things are this way. I believe that. That's where faith starts. My view of reality. Well, again, for these people specifically, what do they have belief in? What do they believe? Well, they believe there's a God and they believe Jesus has the power of God. It doesn't seem at this point maybe they believe he is God. But he has the power of God to do things. The leper believed it. The centurion believed it even on a deeper level. I believe in your power, Jesus. But you see that it goes another step. Belief in something results in commitment to that thing, or at least it should. It starts with this idea of surrender. You stop and think about it. If I believe, and especially for us, because now we know Jesus is the Son of God. He's not just a man with God's power. He was God in the flesh. And he went on to die for us on the cross. If I believe that fact in my mind, well, then it should result in this surrender. You're God, I'm not. I surrender my will to you, Jesus. I surrender control, not that I have it anyway, but I surrender trying to have control to you. I rely on you, and that's what we see here quite a bit, especially by the centurion. He surrenders. You think about it. He had control. And there's a part of us that would have said, I believe Jesus can, but just in case, I'm going to make this Jew come with me. Like, no. He could have done it, but he surrenders. He relies on not just what he can see, and, well, it'd be a lot easier if he was right there. I'm going to rely on, he's got authority just to say the word. And so it results in this commitment. And that's what faith is. Oftentimes we focus just on the belief. Yeah, do you have faith? Yeah, I believe there's a God. I believe Jesus is the Son. That's where it starts, but that results in it manifests itself. And it's this organic thing. You can't separate them really. It's like a seed that turns into a plant. It happens. Belief results in this kind of surrender and reliance, this commitment. So faith is belief and commitment. And you look at these two people, the leper and the centurion. They weren't followers of Jesus. They couldn't be followers of Jesus. The leper was barred from even being around other Jews because he had leprosy. The centurion was a Gentile. They couldn't be followers of Jesus, but Jesus commends them because they've got this faith. And that's the point Matthew's making here. Here's people who aren't following him at all, but they've got what God's looking for. So you followers, this is what you need to have. This is what God really wants. Don't just say the word, I'm a follower. Don't even just go through some of the motions. Have this faith that these people have, this belief and commitment. The followers we've seen already didn't have it. The ones that came down off the mountain and were there, Jesus says you don't have it. I haven't seen it. And there's some others coming up. And so this really sets the stage for the rest of the chapter. Look at verse 14. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on them. Another thing different about this miracle than any other, it's the only time Jesus initiates healing where the person doesn't come to him and say, please heal me. He touches her. She has a fever. And she gets up, and it says she began to wait on them. And I read some things, and a lot of them were like, if Jesus does something for you, then you need to serve him. It's the appropriate thing. And that's true, but really what's it showing that she got up and waited on him? She was completely healed. Yeah, it wasn't like some little thing, it started here and now she'll be ready pretty soon. No, he instantly healed her of this fever and she's able to get up and do a normal activity. And so Jesus heals this woman, and then it goes on to say after that, verse 16, when evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with the word, and he healed all the sick. Demon-possessed, demons are fallen angels. And the Bible doesn't give us details into what demon possession is, but you certainly see it a lot in Jesus' day. We're going to see it at the end of this chapter here. Demons could somehow take control of a person in some way. They couldn't get rid of that demon's influence, and again, inside them in some way. They couldn't get rid of it on their own. And there were people who would cast out demons. Well, you look at Jesus, and he cast them out with a word. There's no question about his authority there. He drove out the spirits, and he healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities, and he bore our diseases. What's the significance of all this? Well, stop and think about. This is the basis for faith. Matthew's showing us, here's everything you need to have faith. First of all, in God's control. Because what have we seen? He casts out these demons, these fallen angels, these powerful spiritual beings. He casts them out with a word. And everyone who comes to him to be healed, it says all of them are healed. Jesus doesn't get to someone and say, oh, sorry, I can't handle this one. This one's beyond me. This one I'm going to have to work at. I'll need to study up. I have to practice. No, he has total control. Everything has been established to believe and trust in God's control and in his love. Because who's he healed so far? He's healed a leper. He's healed a Gentile. And he's healed a woman. I'm sorry, women. Israel hadn't gotten to the point of feminine enlightenment at this point. Women weren't treated terribly in Israel, but they were viewed below men. And so, again, you put all these together, and it's like there's no one outside the scope of Jesus' love. Just like there's nothing outside the scope of his power and control. We can have absolute faith that Jesus is in control and he loves us. Well, let's see if people do after this. What does the faith of the people who come after this look like? Verse 18. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. He sees all these people now who are around him. Why are they around him? Because of the miracles, yeah. Oh, Jesus is doing these things. Whether they had the problem or not, even just to see it, to see someone, and it would be amazing to see, but that was their focus, was just on his power. And so he sees this crowd, and notice it doesn't even say they're following him, it says they're around him. I don't know if that's significant, but it struck me. This crowd around him. And Jesus says, let's get out of here. I don't want to be around these people at this time. Jesus wants to spend time with people who are interested in who he is and his message. And there's this tough balance in the Bible. You've got to establish his credibility and who he is through the miracles, but then people get so focused on the miracles instead of the signs, instead of what the signs point to. Signs are never meant to be the place where you just stop and focus. They're pointing to something else. They're even called, miracles in the Bible are called signs. They point to something. And people often focus on the sign and not what they point to. And so Jesus says, let's get out of here. Let's cross the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Well, before he does, there's a couple people who want to be included in this group that can go with him. It says, then a teacher of the law came to him and said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. There's that word. Jesus replied, Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. You going to follow me now, knowing that? Another disciple said to him, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. And so the point is, you have these two people, and again, this concept of following. I'm going to follow you, Jesus. Jesus says this other one, follow me, but here's what it takes. The point is, following requires a level of commitment. It requires faith. These people undoubtedly had belief in what Jesus could do, but they didn't have that commitment side, that God, I'm all in with you. Everything. No criteria for that. If this is true, nothing like that. No condition for Jesus. These people seem to have it. Jesus says, that's not what a follower of me is. You're someone who just says, no matter what. Well, then he does get into the boat. Verse 23. He gets into the boat and his disciples followed him. There's the fifth time that word occurs. Here's his disciples, these people who have been following him, who have given up some of the comforts, who have left their family behind. So there's certainly a level of commitment. They follow him, and then it says in verse 24, suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake. And that Greek word for furious storm, it means something that is just a huge storm on the lake. And that happens on the Sea of Galilee. It's known for being calm one minute, and then all of a sudden there's a storm. I've been on the Sea of Galilee, and we didn't experience a storm like this, but when we got in the boat, there wasn't a wave at all. And by the time we got to the other side, it was a little rough. No one was really worried about it. It wasn't that rough, but it was just the idea. It wasn't that way when we got in 20 minutes ago. And so that would happen in their time. It still happens today. And a furious storm. And remember, a lot of these disciples are fishermen. They're used to this, but there's something about this one that freaks them out a little. The waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." And he replied, "You of little faith." And you see this huge contrast, don't you, between Jesus' own disciples and this Gentile centurion. It talks about his great faith, and here's the people closest to Jesus. It says, "You of little faith." And the only time that expression little faith is used in the Bible, it's used of disciples. It's not used of people outside. It's used of people who should have greater faith. He says, "Why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. Notice he didn't just, manage to get them to shore safely in the midst of the storm. He stopped the storm. It was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." I looked at this passage here and these verses, and it struck me, you know what? There's an objective standard for faith. Jesus says of the centurion, "You have great faith." And he says of his disciples, "You have little faith." Now, God loves us unconditionally. We are saved by grace, so it's not like God's love for us goes up and down based on our goodness, our badness, or our faith or not. But it is pointing out there is an objective standard of faith. Some people have little faith in terms of, again, the focus of it, not so much how much they have, the focus. And others have great faith in what it includes and what it's focused on. Strive for that great faith. We need to be able to look at ourselves and say, what's my faith like? That's really the point of everything here in this passage today. And then one more set of verses, one more story that at first I wondered, why did this one get included? I could have stopped right there, and it seemed like, I had everything I needed for a sermon to wrap up. I'm like, boy, that'd be a good place to stop. And then he throws in this other one, this interesting experience on the other side. Verse 28, it says, "When he arrived at the other side, in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men came from the tombs and met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. 'What do you want with us, Son of God?' they shouted." The demons shouted out. They knew who he was. The people this time didn't know for sure, but the demons, they knew Jesus was the Son of God, God himself. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" That seems to point out that the demons know what's going to happen. They know in this battle, they've already lost. It's just not over yet. There's going to be a time when they are tortured for eternity. And so have you come here to do it before that time? We thought we still had some time before that came, before that happened. Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." Notice they don't try to put up a fight. They know it's hopeless. And then he says to them, one word, "Go." That doesn't take any more than a word. So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. I thought about it. They reported all this. What? Well, our pigs are dead. Oh, and those 2 guys too. They're healed of the demons. Including like a little afterthought, a little footnote. Our pigs are dead. Oh, and the guys are doing better too. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. He's just done this, and they plead with him, not to stay and help us. You've already helped us. This place we couldn't pass by because of these men. Now we can pass by. They said, "Get out, please, Jesus. Leave us alone." Well, that's a lot of things that have happened. And again, as you look, you break it down. And it took me a while. It really did, getting ready for this sermon. Like, all right, what's the point of all this? You put it together. It starts off with these 2 men. It ends up with these Gentile pig farmers. What's the point, God? And I think there's a few key ideas here. The first one is, and this one's pretty simple, following Jesus requires faith. Following Jesus requires faith. Not just belief in what Jesus can do, but that next level of faith, that commitment that comes from it. Because if you don't have that, then you are just a fan. I believe in Jesus and what he can do, and boy, I love to think about what he can do in my life, and I love to listen to his music and his verses. They encourage me to, wow, God can do great things in my life. That's a fan. That's not a follower. Certainly not a follower who has faith. It doesn't have that element of surrender that you see throughout the Bible. Jesus, when he prays, Father, I pray this cup would pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. God, I surrender to your will. We saw in the model prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done. God, I'm surrendered to whatever you want. I'm about to pray for some things I'd like, but before I even pray for my daily bread, I surrender to your will. And God, hallowed be your name. That's in that prayer too. It's that total surrender that says, God, my purpose in life is to bring glory to you. Whatever is going to do that, I am surrendered to it. And God, I rely on you. Again, you look at the model prayer, give us this day our daily bread. And it's not just praying for the things itself. It's praying for this attitude that says, God, I want to rely on you and your provision for me, not the things that I can see a day or a week or a month ahead and know everything's taken care of, and I don't have to trust you. I don't have to rely on you. God, I want to get in the frame of mind where I do rely on you. Where I not just I want the daily bread to take care of my needs, I want an attitude, a mindset, a heart that says, God, I want things to be met daily so that every morning I wake up and I've got to rely on you. I want to get there and I want to be okay with it. That's what the Bible talks about. Luke 9:23, we bring up this verse often. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Again, whoever wants to be my disciple, you see faith there. Why would you be a disciple of Jesus? Why would you be a person who wants to, again, make him the person I'm learning from and about? Well, I believe in him. I believe that he is who he says he is. I believe that he has wisdom for my life. I want to be, and it's our choice. If we believe in Jesus, if we want to be a disciple, whoever wants to be my disciple, but then note he says, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. Your belief has to result in commitment. It's not just belief in who I am as a person who's able to do things, or maybe has done something that will bring forgiveness and eternal life. You have to totally commit to me. You have to take up a cross, and a person carrying a cross had no more choices. They were surrendered. James 1, 2, and 3, I thought of this verse too. It says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. How in the world can you do that? The only way you can do that is if you're surrendered. Because if you've got this expectation, God, here's what life should be like. It should be this, and definitely not that. I might take a little bit of this, none of that. If that's the way you approach life, you're never going to be able to consider it all joy, because you've already said, there's no way it can be joy if it doesn't fit in these parameters, God. I'm not surrendered to anything else. I'm not able to rely on you in the midst of other things. I've got my mind made up. I believe in you, but no, that rest of that, just not sure. To be a follower of Jesus requires faith, or we're still just a fan. Well, the second key idea, as I thought about this, more of a question: what is limiting our faith? Every one of us here, in some way, to some degree, are following, in some sense. You didn't absolutely refuse to come to that. No way am I setting, foot in a clubhouse, even if it's used for a church. There's some degree of following, but I thought about, what about our faith? Is it limited in some way? Is there something about, okay, I'm following him to some degree, but my faith, it's just not where it could be. I looked at these people who were following Jesus, and you see the limits of their faith. This teacher of the law, what's that tell you he was probably interested in? He was interested in the knowledge. He'd been studying the law, and here's this man who spoke like no one's ever spoke. I want to get his input on all these things. I want to pick his brain. I want to get some of that knowledge. But look what Jesus says to him. The foxes have dens, the birds have nests. Seems like this person had an expectation of some comfort. Like, if I follow these other teachers, they've got a pretty good life. I stick around with them, I'll have a good life too. And Jesus is saying, that's not me. If you want to follow me, you're not going to have a place to lay your head sometimes. You want that? Are you committed enough to me for that? The disciple with his father, again, I've often heard it, and it sort of tries to maybe limit it a little bit, that maybe his father wasn't dead yet. And so he, that's why Jesus is saying, hey, I can't wait 3, 4, 5 years for your father to die, and then you... No, as I read other things, it's like, no, his father may be dead, and the funeral may be coming up, but Jesus says, you know what? You're going to follow me. This is your main priority. And we read that, and we think, really? Jesus comes before family? Yeah, Jesus comes before family. It's God, family, and then myself. God, family, others in a lot of ways, then myself. Now, when I do that, when I put things in the right priority, it makes all the others better. It makes my family relationship better, my relationship with others, my relationship with myself, if God's first. And so this person there was a limit to his faith. God, just this one thing, certainly you wouldn't deny me this, would you, Jesus? Jesus says, yeah, if it comes down to it, you got to make the choice. You got to come with me now. And then you think about Jesus' disciples who were following him. I just thought about, before they got on that boat, they'd seen so many miracles. They'd been present at all his miracles. They'd seen so much. But the storm freaks them out for some reason. The storm, it changes things. And I wondered about it. Is it because Jesus is asleep? Like, oh no, we're going to die because Jesus was asleep. Is that your view of God, really? It's like this little detail. Whoa, the storm happened while Jesus was asleep, and we all perished because of it. If he'd only been awake, things would have been so much different. And so they go and they wake him up. Maybe it's the element of danger. If someone else needs healing, okay, fine, I'm doing okay. They'll be better off if he heals them, but I'll be all right if he doesn't. But now it's me at stake. It's my safety at stake. And sometimes, that's our limit. God, I can't trust you there. I believe you can do things, but boy, it's tough to rely on you for something this serious, this deep, this personal to me. And we can't put those limits. I thought about it. Faith is often, people say faith's the opposite of reason. Don't ever agree to that. Faith is not the opposite of reason. It's the opposite of sight. You haven't seen it. You can't see it. But it's very reasonable. And I thought about, look at the reasonableness of people in this passage. You have the centurion who believes Jesus can do something. And because he believes Jesus has the ability, he says, you don't even have to come. If you just say it. If you've got power, you've got enough power to heal long distance. It just makes sense. It's logical. And then you have Jesus' own disciples that they've seen him do things over and over and over. And wouldn't it be logical to think this storm is really not going to be an issue for him? But it freaks him out. Who was being logical in that situation? It was the centurion who had faith, not the disciples who didn't. Faith is entirely reasonable, and we're reasonable when we have faith. But what did the disciples say? And I think this was the key. You notice after he calmed the storm, did you see what they said? What kind of man is this? At this point, they still thought Jesus was a man. He was a pretty special man, but he was still a man. And I think sometimes for us, we answer, who is Jesus? He's God, because we've been told that, believe that. But there's a part of us who treats him like he's just a man who's special. Not he's God in the flesh. And that's where they were. Like, we've seen this man do some amazing things, but we don't know that he can do this until it happens, and then they're blown away. What kind of man is this? This changes everything in our perspective. We've been putting him in this box. He's bigger than that box. He's bigger than our boxes. What is limiting our faith? And maybe that's it. Maybe we put Jesus in some box. And then the last idea, limited faith equals limited abundant life. Limited faith, if we have that, to the same degree we have limited abundant life. In John 10, Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Well, I know a lot of Christians, a lot of disciples, and if I thought about it, I'd have to say they're experiencing a limited abundance. Which is like government intelligence. It's this oxymoron. I've got a limited abundance. Yeah, that's my experience of Jesus. He came to bring me abundant life. I've got a limited abundance. That's not God's plan. That's not his intention for us. You look at that. The disciples, I look at them. The disciples were afraid. And then you contrast them with the centurion. The whole passage really revolves around the two of them. And you've got the disciples, they're little faith, and the centurion, he's a man of great faith. What also says about the disciples, they were afraid. And it doesn't say anything about the centurion, but don't you picture him as having this total peace? He's like, if you just say you can heal my servant, he's going to be healed. You don't have to come here. I know what authority's like. I've got this. I just picture him with total peace. And the disciples, it comes out and says, they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to drown. They're afraid for their lives. That's not an abundant life. God doesn't want us to go through life being afraid like that. He wants us to have that peace. Matter of fact, the verses that I quoted above where it talks about what we need to do, this commitment, look at the full passage of James chapter 1. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. We hate that verse. Like, oh, it's not joyful. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. But then look what it says. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Mature and complete. I've got a full-grown faith that's complete in every area. Am I perfect? No, but my faith is mature and complete. Don't you think that's an abundant life? When you get to the point that your faith is mature and complete. And so God wants us to have this commitment, this faith. Why? Because he knows if you don't have that faith, you don't have the abundant life. Same thing with Luke. Again, we read the first part. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. But look at the next part. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? He says, yeah, I do demand total commitment. And you know why? Because if you don't commit to me, you miss out on everything. Not just abundant life here. Here it's pointing at the fact you miss out on eternal life altogether. And that's why I think this passage ends with this story of the demon-possessed man in this area of Gadara, the Gadarenes. You know, no faith, just like limited faith equals limited abundant life, no faith equals no life. Not just no abundant life, no eternal life. No relationship with God. You know, these Gadarenes, again, I look at them, they expelled their source of blessing. Here, Jesus had made their life better. They can now pass by the cemetery if that's the easiest way to get to Aunt Mary's house. We can go that way now. But they said, get out of here, Jesus. And I thought about it. And I thought, why is this passage tacked on at the end? Why is it included in this chapter? Well, think about it. At the end of this chapter, these Gentile pig farmers are as close to Jesus as any of these Jews who are following him who aren't truly committed disciples. He left to get away from the Jews who were just following him for miracles. These Gentiles tell him to get away, leave us. At the end of the day, you got these Jews, these subjects of the kingdom who've been waiting for the Messiah for so long. And where are they? They're across the lake from Jesus. And you got these Gentile pig farmers. In a Jew's mind, just the lowest of low that you could get. And where are they? They're separated from Jesus too. Doesn't matter what your reason is for not being a committed follower. At the end of the day, if you're not a committed follower, Jesus is over there and you're somewhere else. I thought about that. What an image there. These Jews, we're as close to Jesus as Gentile pig farmers if we don't show this commitment. Well, I think there's always a root problem. Again, I look at this and I think about myself. It's like, oh, if it was just that easy, I could do it. And I thought about what's the root problem in this area today. And I think for believers, the root problem is we become accustomed to this kind of superficial commitment. We become accustomed to it's okay to follow Jesus a little bit. That's better than people who don't follow him at all. Hey, I've got one up on them. You know, the greatest obstacle to full commitment to Jesus isn't no commitment, it's partial commitment. And thinking it's good enough. You know, are you following Jesus? Yeah, I'm doing good enough. Again, God's not up in heaven judging us on how well we do, but what he wants for us, he's saying, don't make that your standard. What is the standard? What's the key to overcoming this danger that we have of thinking I'm doing good enough? It's worship. It's this idea we've been seeing from the beginning of Matthew where it says at chapter 1, God has a plan and we have a part. And then you see over and over this idea of worship, worship, worship. What's worship mean? Worship means to declare God's worth. And this is what I talked about in communion. If God is the God, the creator, the all-powerful being, deity of the universe, how good is good enough? As I'm following God, as I think about my faith, And not just the belief, the commitment. How much commitment to the all-powerful creator God of the universe is good enough? There's no limit to it, is there? It's like we saw in the Sermon on the Mount. What's the standard? Well, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's the standard. God knows we won't ever achieve it, but don't aim for something lower. Don't aim for, well, I'm doing good enough. We're talking about the God of the universe here. I'm doing good enough? I'm following him good enough? And the same thing, if you're not a believer, if you haven't made that commitment yet, again, to stop and think, who is he? I need to answer that question. It's where it starts. It's not, am I going to be a follower or not? It's, who is God? Because if you truly answer that question and then you're consistent with it, who is God? Who is Jesus? The response, it shouldn't be a question. If there is a God and Jesus is his son and died for my sins, well, my response to that should be just as organic and natural. I have to commit to that. Once I believe in it, I have to commit to it and fully. And so the last thing today, what do I need to do? And I thought about it, just realize the implications of belief and worship. And we talk about, I believe there's a God, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. Stop and think about what that means in our life. I want to worship God, and that doesn't mean I come here and sing songs entirely. It means I view him as entirely worthy, entirely different. All right, what's that do in my life? Make those implications, that's the second thing. Make those implications our mark. Don't aim for lower. You know, our mark, our goal, the target. That's my goal. I want to live my life like I truly believe there is a God and Jesus is his son and he died for me. I want to live my life consistent with that belief. I want to live my life with that much commitment, that much surrender, that much reliance on him and nothing else. Because if I truly believe there's a God and Jesus is his son and he loves me and he's in control, I don't need anything else. It doesn't mean I don't need to do what I need to do. But I'm relying ultimately on God, not on me. And when we do that, what will it look like? Well, again, I keep going back to the centurion and the disciples. Here's these followers of Jesus. They've been with him for weeks or months now. They've seen him do miracle after miracle, and a storm comes up, and what happens? We're going to drown. You know? All right, we're okay. We've got peace as long as there's no storms out there, but boy, throw a storm at us, and it all goes out the window. And then you got the centurion. And I realize he wasn't in personal danger, but he must have cared enough for the servant to make the trip there, to talk to Jesus, to approach him. And he's got total peace. I know if you just say a word, you don't need to come to my house. Just say a word from here. You've got authority. I know it'll happen. Wouldn't you like to have a life like that? Wouldn't you like to have a peace like that centurion? God, you just say the word, whatever word you want, whatever needs to happen, that's what will happen. And I'm just going to be okay with it. Well, I put down starting the discussion question here because I realize we all want that. We would love to have that peace. We don't want to be afraid like the disciples. But yet that doesn't always represent our life. And so I asked the question and give it some thought. Let's discuss it a little. How is it so easy to rationalize about God? How is it so easy not to have that full commitment and reliance on him? How is it so easy to hedge our bets when we're talking about the God of the universe? I mean, on the one hand, we all believe that. Again, there is a God. He's all-powerful. He's this creator. Jesus is his son. He loves us. He died for us. His spirit lives within us as believers. Yet I'm just not sure he can handle this, and so I'm going to hedge my bet a little bit. How does that happen? How does that work? Why is it? What do you think?